It was back in the late 19th and early 20th century that travel, tourism, and photography began to develop alongside one another, which enabled more and more people from around the world to make a visit down to the old promised land. One of those visitors was a man called Herman Melville, who famously authored Moby Dick, but it's a little known fact that he also wrote an 18,000-line poem about Palestine. It's the longest poem in all of American literature, and what's more is Melville, like Mark Twain, also left us a travel diary for his 1857 trip to Jerusalem. So Melville reports here that Jerusalem was a gloomy, grimy, and peculiar place. Any splendor that city had was long gone. It was poverty-stricken, plague-stricken. There was war-torn damage that looked to be hundreds of years old. It appeared to be in the same condition it was back in the Crusades. It just seemed like time had flattened out in the city of Jerusalem. The author tells us that the entire town smelled like burning garbage at all times, and he refers to some parts of the city as ruinous, while also saying that calling it a ruin is a little too kind. The place was a wreck. He said that traveling through Judea was like riding over moldy plains. All is barren, with bleached landscape resembling leprosy and old cheese. It's an encrustation of curses, and he referred to it as trash creation. But on the bright side, he did say they had really good coffee. Melville also commented here on the ungovernable quality of the area. He writes of groups of Arabs with pistols who regularly rob a certain village in Jericho. Personally witnessed a group of 30 armed Arabs pull off a robbery. You'll notice when reading this that the author never uses the term Palestinian. It's almost always an Arab, or a Syrian Arab, or a Turk, or a Jew, or an Orthodox. At no point does he refer to anyone as just a plain old Palestinian, and it's my understanding that that label was not used until 100 years later. But to be fair, at no point does Melville ever try to make the case for the restoration of Jews to Judea, aka Zionism. He only affirms the continuity of Jewish life and Jewish presence in Jerusalem, notwithstanding the fact that they were comparatively a very small group. And it's another fact that it was the Arabs who did most of the farming in Palestine, and the Jews hated farming. The reason the Jewish people hated farming was because they were vulnerable to persecution by Arabs and by Turks, and they wouldn't dare live outside of walled-off cities and towns. And obviously, the act of farming would have opened them up to attacks. So it was a safety issue. Melville summarizes Jerusalem in the following famous quote: "No country will more quickly dissipate romantic expectations than Palestine, particularly Jerusalem. In the emptiness of the lifeless antiquity of Jerusalem, the emigrant Jews are like flies that have taken up their abode in a skull." The city of Jerusalem was a society based on a hierarchy of people, languages, and religions. At the top were the Turks. The Turks ruled over the Arabs. The Arabs were of a higher status than the Jews, and then at the very bottom were the Polish Jews living in squalor and filth. And as a matter of fact, during the 19th century, Jewish people were banned from building or repairing their houses in Jerusalem, causing hundreds of Jewish families to flee the city. And incidentally, there were Arab families who were petitioning the Sultan in Istanbul to put an outright ban on Jewish immigration. Of course, there were times of harmony among the peoples of Jerusalem. Things like celebrating holidays together, sharing meals together, honoring one another's traditions. It's good stuff. But it was also common for Jews to be beaten and extorted and thrown in jail and persecuted on a daily basis. During his trip, Melville got wind of an instance in which a Jewish funeral was massacred by Arabs. And on another occasion, he learned of a mob of Orthodox pilgrims who beat up some Jews for getting too close to a church, allegedly. So it seems to me that it was both Jewish and Arab peasants that were suffering in 19th century Palestine, while these high-status Arab clans were profiting. Even the great Karl Marx in 1854 wrote of the sadness of Jerusalem. He's asking, why should the Jewish people be made to suffer and be so miserable in their own land? Plenty of sources back up what's written in Melville's travelogue. There are multiple credible eyewitnesses who saw the same sights, had similar experiences, and made the same assessments about the place, that Jerusalem was decaying, the Ottomans treated the city in an insulting manner, and the Jewish people were brutally oppressed by Turks and Arabs. Thanks for watching.